Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Ichigo Awakens in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 41, The Enemy Moves. The Living World. Orium stared at her brother in shock. He just revealed that he knew about the other life she lived and that he could train her. She looked up at the tag on the frozen hollow's face, reading the kanji for bind on its surface. She was so lost in her surprise that her shield faded, but the hollows had a new target in her brother. Just as soon as the bottom half of that hollow duo left her, it tried to attack Sora. The formerly normal human just smirked as a large white serpent with small horns appeared and sprayed acid on the hollow. As the top-shaped empty soul reeled in pain, the serpent shot forth and devoured the corrupted soul, swallowing it with ease. "Thank you, Hebai-chan," Sora said as he walked toward his little sister. "Come on out, you lot," he called out as the Shun-Shunrika manifested themselves, each giving a small bow to the suited man. "Hey, enough of that. I may have contracted you, but you're my sisters now. Has she been taking care of you?" Shun-O came forth and answered for the group. "She still has some confidence issues in regards to combat, but she's treated us well," the sprite said with a smile. Sora nodded approvingly as the 6 fairies floated around their master and wielder. "Sora, what is going on?" Orium demanded, tossing the cute timid part aside for the moment to get answers. "How do you know about hollows and my powers? And what do you mean you contracted the Shun-Shunrika?" Sora smiled gently as he pulled out more paper tags, these saying purification, and threw them at the larger, frozen hollow. "You know about the hollows, the Shinigami, and the Quincy obviously," he started, getting closer to his sister while his white serpent shrunk down and wrapped around him. "Well, hollows are a danger. You need to be of a specific bloodline to be a Quincy, and Soul Reapers back in the day were not the most reliable group. This allowed a rise of a group of specially trained humans to fight off the hollows, which were far more passively destructive back then compared to now." He snapped his fingers, making the purification tags erupt into white fire and consume the hollow. The exorcists, more spiritually powered humans that fought off the corrupted spirits. Monks, priests, shrine maidens, and the Onmyoji. Each used a specialized method of spells, tools, or contracted spirits. He took off the remaining parts of her hairpins to show a small, almost unnoticeable pattern that was the contract with the Shun-Shunrika. The people that could become full-fledged exorcists were few and far between, and when Soul Reapers started to get better at their jobs, our occupation sort of faded except for a scarce few. Auntie is one of those few, and she trained me after I got us away from our parents. The Shun-Shunrika were meant to protect you until it was time to train you in the ways of the exorcist. So why did you take so long?" Orium asked, almost glaring at her brother as she studied him. He simply smiled and gave her an uncharacteristic nudge. "Because, my darling little sister, I'm the only one in this house that does any actual work to support us and let you go to school," he said in a strained, cheery tone while Orium was going "ow" repeatedly. "School and living expenses aren't cheap, and I do a lot of hard work. You have your friends to protect you, and I can only have so much time off." He let go of her, letting her cradle her steaming head and give teary puppy eyes to her brother. "I can give you the scrolls and books to start you on your training, but you must promise to read them thoroughly and be extremely careful in your training. Understand?" he asked, earning a few nods from his little sister. "Good. Now let's go home. I'm starving." Karakura High School. And that's what happened. Orium said, filling in the rest of her friends and teammates on what occurred while they were off celebrating. "You guys sounded like you had so much fun, Lucky," she said, pouting that she had to work while they didn't, completely ignoring the shocked looks on their faces. Tatsuki was the first to bring herself out of the stunned stupor. "Orium, this is amazing." She cheered happily for her friend. "If what you said is true, you could become so much stronger." Orium giggled sheepishly while giving a cutesy smile. "Just happy to help, guys," she said with a wink, somehow manifesting a small star. Unfortunately, the cheer was short-lived as they all felt 3 strong Ryotsus coming. All of which felt familiar to the 2 Quincy in the group. Kigo and the other normal classmates came over with a tense atmosphere. "Hey, good or bad?" Mizwaro asked, referring to what they were all feeling. We got 3 new transfer students coming in. Ichigo informed them, uncharacteristically serious for the moment. They seem like foreigners and had this really bad vibe around them. Aside from that riot, so we felt. To put in perspective, Chizuru chimed in, 2 of them are total babes and I couldn't even think about fondling them. That's what prompted everyone to look at her with shock. Yeah, I was that scared. She said just as their teacher came in. Alright class, we have 3 transfer coming in, so try to make them feel welcomed. She said as the 3 new kids came in, instantly catching everyone's attention. The first was a pretty lean-built guy with metal nuts and bold piercings in his ears, an unkempt school uniform, and bald aside from a long red mohawk. He had a feeling about him that screamed, delinquent, so much that people started re-evaluating Ichigo's thug status. The other 2 were girls. The brown-haired one was neater and wore a beret, while the one with green hair had a few top buttons undone. Both seemed like bad news, so much so that Ichigo didn't even try to glomp either of them. Introduce yourselves and find a seat, Oka said as she stood to the side. My name is Bazard Black, people call me Bazby. The Mohawk told the class, glaring at a certain hybrid in particular. Don't get in my way and don't piss me off. Ichigo returned the glare, already knowing this was going to be trouble. My name is Bambietta Basterbine. Beret Girl said. And boys, don't bother. I'm not interested in boyfriends or friends at all. She finished, prompting the last girl forward. Name's Candace Catnip, and just don't mess up my look. She told them, seeming like the easiest to get along with in a group no one wanted to associate with. Urayu and Ichigo shared a glance before sending looks to the rest of their friends. A simple message saying, they're going to be trouble. Karakura school entrance. The day went by relatively peacefully, aside from the tense atmosphere the transfers created. There was another hollow attack, but nothing Squad 15's grunts couldn't handle, something that concerned the seated members. Were these lesser hollow scouts, or was something big coming? The arrival of the 3 Quincy just made matters worse. They kept a relative distance, but they clearly had their eyes on Ichigo and Urayu. They informed Ashine about the situation and he advised they have minimized contact with them. Something that came to a head when school let out and Bazby was waiting at the entrance. Hey! Ichigo Kurosaki. The Vandenrike elite called out to the lieutenant. Word around the school is that you're the toughest in the school. Not surprising. Ichigo responded, not even intimidated by the enemy Quincy. A bunch of idiots come to fight me often. He kept walking, getting closer and closer to Bazby, hoping to avoid a fight to see what his dad was planning about this situation. Prove it. The thug Quincy said, walking up to meet him. Fight me. The atmosphere grew noticeably tense as the 2 glared at each other, Bazby trying to goad Ichigo and Ichigo glaring at him like an insect. Unless you're scared, strawberry. He taunted as Ichigo kept walking and went past him. Not interested, rooster. Ichigo returned as he and his friends passed by. Bazby clenched in anger as the hybrid ignored him, so he decided to give him no choice. Wasn't asking. He said, just before he threw a punch at the hybrid. Anyone with enough spiritual awareness could see the Reishi in the Quincy's arm as he struck at Ichigo. And you're gonna regret that. He growled as his fist connected, a fist that was caught by Ichigo's hand. Ichigo matched the blood artery with his blood vein. Am I? Ichigo asked before tossing his bag to Urayu, who caught it effortlessly. Go on ahead, I'll catch up. They all nodded and continued on, heading for the Shoten to report to Captain Ashine and get their patrol schedule for the day. And you know, Quincy, for a recruitment officer you really know how to make the wrong choices. The hybrid growled at the surprised rooster head, who received a harsh punch to the face that knocked him back a few steps. After a second passed, the duo settled into a comfortable combat stance. Now this is more like it. Bazby said with a smirk as he charged at the hybrid again. Using the barest amount of his blood skills to enhance his physical abilities and not seem completely inhuman. He threw another punch at the hybrid, who blocked and threw another of his own. The brawl continued on for another hour, Bazby managing to get Ichigo a couple of times, but he was in much worse condition than the hybrid. Ichigo practically danced around the Quincy's attacks, delivered punches and kicks in precise areas that kept weakening the elite. As it went on, it was clear who the victor was going to be. "You wanna call it quits yet?" Ichigo asked, wiping some blood from the corner of his mouth. A result from a punch the Mohawk man made. "This has gotten boring and I have somewhere to be." Basby growled fiercely, ignoring the burning ache of his many bruises and cuts. "Shut the hell up!" he yelled, charging at Ichigo again, unconsciously channeling his heat. "I don't get it. How is he beating me?" he thought in frustration as Ichigo shifted the punch away and striking the elite in the gut. "I'm one of the top soldiers in this army. I'm stronger than this runt. That's why I have my shrift," he thought as Ichigo punched him across the face. "If I could just manipulate the REI," he froze, realizing now a vital point. He was strong, a master in Reishi manipulation, that was his main skill. Ichigo Kurosaki wasn't tied down by those restrictions, and he took full advantage of that. He was faster, stronger, and more skilled. "Screw it," he thought, refusing to go down without landing a major hit of his own. He poured his power into a blood artery punch, aimed right at Ichigo's face. The blow connected with a loud crack. He smirked in his victory before coughing up blood. "Nice punch," Ichigo said before pulling his fist away from the doubled-over Quincy. "Mine's better." He rolled his neck around and began to walk away. "Thanks for wasting my time, Rooster," he said, heading for the Shoten. Urahara's Shoten, central base of Squad 15. "Ishida already informed me about the Quincy at the school," Ishine told his son while doing his never-ending mountain of paperwork. "How they are likely trying to spy on you, or at least convince you to join their ranks." He put down his pen and gave his son and lieutenant his full attention. "And then you went and beat the crap out of one of them." Ichigo nodded as the Kurosakis had an intense stare down. The less combat-oriented members of the squad watched their first and second in command coldly at each other. "That's my boy," he yelled out in his ridiculous fatherly pride, killing the tense atmosphere as Lisa brought more stacks of paper. In all seriousness though, this is troubling Ichigo. You can't drop your guard around them, especially not the girls. "Don't worry, Dad," Ichigo told his father, expelling himself from his body. "There's no way I'll spill any secrets that we have now. Considering the training and abuse we've put you through, I don't expect you to break under that kind of pressure." Ishine responded. "It's not Basby I'm worried about. You're stronger and smarter than that. It's the other two I'm worried about," he said, taking a serious look. "Too often are there beautiful things that kill with poison. They may attempt to seduce you, Ichigo. That is why." The very background seemed to change into a crudely drawn version of itself while he pointed at his son. "To make you immune to feminine wiles you must be sexually satisfied." "What?" Ichigo screamed in his head, leading to the two Zanjutsus to argue over the merits of the idea. Everyone else just seemed to sigh tiredly at their captain's antics. "They must think you're a helpless, easily tempted virgin so they'll try to seduce you. So you must be the seducer." Ishine continued unashamedly. "Captain's orders, get some nightly. In fact, hey Lisa." He called to his secretary, unaware of Ichigo's rising anger and clenched fist. "Want to volunteer?" "Certainly sir." The visored responded, slipping off her sailor outfit-styled Shinigami uniform. Ichigo's anger peaked and he punched his dad in the face and through a wall. The hybrid glared at the perverted Soul Reaper. "Disregard those last orders," Ichigo said, using his authority as lieutenant to restore order. Captain Ishine was just spouting nonsense. Lisa seemed to look disappointed, but it was too subtle. "Did he give Uriah the same orders?" he asked, prompting Lisa to shake her head. "No, he just assumes third seat Ishida is asexual," she answered, prompting Ichigo to sigh in annoyance. "And this goofball is still a captain," he groaned, just as alarms started blaring. "That can't be good." Ishine came back into the room as Hiyori burst in, looking oddly disturbed. "Just got done fixing the monitoring systems," she panted out between breaths. "Two hollows in the park. One is definitely a Vastolord," she said, shocking everyone in the room. Vastolords were the strongest among hollows, enough to give captains trouble. Hiri, who's at the park, and call them back immediately. Ishine ordered quickly. Ichigo, let's go. Tatsuki has already engaged them, she said, prompting father and son to bolt. Karakura Park, Tatsuki's team. Tatsuki was running a sweep through the park, keeping an eye out for any hollows or pluses. Lately there were fewer and fewer hollows, which had split a good portion of the division on whether or not this was a good thing. Tatsuki was being one of the more cautious members of the division and was keeping her eyes peeled for anything. She was doing her second sweep of the area when it happened. Two monstrous Ryotsus appeared out of nowhere and slammed into the ground, cratering it with its force. Acting quickly, her unit and herself made their way to where the power was centered. A crowd was already forming around the crater, filled with curious and worried people. "Orders, ma'am?" one of her soldiers asked, but she practically froze. These two were out of her league. She knew that much from the Ryotsu pressing down on her. She powered through the pressure and saw this giant. He was bigger than Chad, with tan skin, ridges on his head, a large hole in his chest, and a skeletal jaw on his mouth. He had these bushy eyebrows and sideburns with a long dark ponytail, and red markings under his eyes. He wore white hakama pants and a white jacket that he left open, revealing his muscled body. Everything about him fit the description that Urahara gave them about Aaron Carr. This was it. Aizen was making his move. "So, where am I supposed to find this Kurosaki guy I'm supposed to fight?" he said in a deep tone, shaking Tatsuki out of her stupor. "Hey, Ulquiorra, you're the expert on him, right?" he called down to his companion, who soon came out of the crater. "Get everyone out of here," Tatsuki ordered quickly and urgently. "Evacuate the entire park. Normal humans, pluses, the other Soul Reapers, just get them out of here." As much as the big guy scared her, his smaller companion was far more terrifying. Bone-white skin, piercing green eyes, teal lines going down his face like tears, and what could only be described as a broken horned helmet resting on the left side of his head. "He'll find us," the now identified Ulquiorra stated, deep but softly. "Especially with that entrance you've made." Yami stretched his neck and surveyed the fleeing populace. "Might as well have a pre-fight snack." Yami grumbled before he started to take a deep breath. When that happened, Tatsuki felt a pull on her soul, as saw many others beginning to lose theirs. Thinking quickly, she shot a fireball right into his mouth, which then exploded. "Ah! Bitch! What the hell was that?" Yami roared in anger. "That would be Tatsuki Arisawa," Ulquiorra said, looking right at the human. "She's an empowered human that seems to manipulate her Reishi to act as fire. She's close to our target. What do you two want with Ichigo?" she demanded, settling into a fighting stance and doing her best not to collapse. Ulquiorra stepped forward, getting in between her and Yami. "Lord Aizen wants more information on Ichigo Kurosaki and sent the two of us," he answered, sensing two stronger presences heading their way. "Yami is here to fight, maybe even kill him, while I'm here to simply observe. So how pissed do you think he'd be when he comes by to find this little lady dead?" Yami asked with a demented sneer on his face, already planning on eating Tatsuki's soul. "Very," they heard a voice say before Yami got kicked in the face, hard. The large Aaron car was sent tumbling while Ichigo rose to his full height. Ishine appeared behind Tatsuki and placed a hand on her shoulder, shaking her from her frozen fear. "You did good, Tatsuki," he said, gently but firm, leaving no room to argue. "Now get out of here. We got this," the captain said as he prepared to face Ulquiorra, who was already in front of Ichigo. "So, this is how strong you are now," he said, examining the hybrid with zero malice. "You've really changed, Ichigo." Ichigo responded, feeling creeped out by the interest the Aaron car was showing in him. When the White Hollow's words registered with him, he started to focus again. "Do I know you?" he began to ask until the two locked eyes with each other. Ichigo felt a memory, way back in his mind, pull itself free from the mental depths. "Ulquiorra? Is that you?" he asked, surprising everyone but Ulquiorra, who seemed to have the barest hint of a smile. "It's good to finally meet you again." Illustrated Guide to Soul Reapers. East vs West. An intense argument was brewing in the Kukaki manor. A debate laced with frustration and anger between the two leading men of the Kukaki and the Shiba. Ishine sat across from Byakuya, ready to continue the argument between the two. The most important thing to decide on before continuing with anything else. Ichigo and Rukia, the two meant to marry, could do naught but sit idly by. She should wear a wedding dress. Ishine stated, using passion to fuel his side. She's marrying into my family in Masaki and I dreamed of passing down her dress to our daughter. It should be the traditional kimono. Byakuya said, stoically as ever. It adheres to traditions and Hisano would be glad to have Rukia wear hers. The argument continued as neither side would yield. Do I even get to have a say? Rukia moaned, not liking that her dress choice was being made for her. Ichigo could only wrap his arm around his fiancée, while the two men bickered like children. Let's just ask Mom, he said, choosing the more sensible option. The new SMA. Okay, since Ichigo and I are here anyway we might as well make the best of the situation. Urayu informed the Shinigami Men's Association members. He was currently dressed in the same manner as the other members, open jacket hanging on his shoulders and a pair of sunglasses in the same make of his usual glasses. There were muffled cries of agony from Ishine getting beaten by his son in the other room. While Ichigo vents our collective frustration at Ishine for the next hour, what are the important things I need to know? He asked, prompting a bunch of confident smirks. Here with the Men's Association, we strive to exemplify and improve the life of the men in Siriti. Iba announced proudly, earning an applause from the other club members. Urayu remained unimpressed. So what have you done to do that? He asked, causing them to sweat nervously. We work to find the truest expression of manly. Iba yelled out. By doing what? Urayu asked, getting more annoyed by the second. Next on the agenda was designing a man's phone. Yasakika informed the Quincy. How does that help the cause? Urayu growled in frustration. A macho man must have everything be as manly as possible. Iba answered with full confidence in his cause. Plus this is the only thing we can afford to do with our current budget. Yasakika handed Urayu the budget reports for the Men's Association, resulting in a large bulging, throbbing vein in Urayu's head. 90,000 gone. He yelled at the low price, making everyone else in the room shrink in fear. Who handles the budget? All hands slowly pointed to Iba. Do any of you do anything? Urayu growled, making them slowly shake their heads. 5 minutes later. Iba lay in a crumpled, broken heap. Ishine was covered in bumps and bruises. The rest of the association writhed in agony aside for Yukatake, and Ichigo, and Urayu were wiping blood off their hands. Okay, changing things. Urayu stated calmly. First order, Ishine is now our president/scapegoat, I will be handling the management side of things under the guise of the treasurer, and Ichigo is now our poster boy. All in favor? The room was filled with moans, most out of disapproval. Motion passes. Good meeting everyone. I need to fix our budget now. Chapter 42, Hollow Friendship. Hueco Mundo, 5 years ago. Time passed seamlessly for him. Trapped in the eternal night of the endless desert of the land of hollows. It mattered very little to this oddity of his kind. Born bone-white among his pitch-black companions, born with only his eyes freed from his mask while his brethren had their faces. He was alone in the world and he was content to simply lay in his home of emptiness and thorns, simply existing. Like the single solitary tree of sharp spines he called his home. He forgot how long he laid there in the nothingness, but it didn't matter. Every day was the same. Until he felt a presence show up just outside of his tree. Wanting to determine the presence with his own eyes, the Vastolord slowly freed himself from the sharp spines that surrounded him until he freed himself from the comfort of the empty tree. He only ever trusted what he saw since his sight was his only other sense aside from spirit sensing. He slowly freed himself from his home to find a large cobra hollow creeping on a sleeping child that radiated Ryotsu like a beacon. Interesting. The white hollow thought to himself as the serpent came closer and closer. The cobra caught sight of him and froze, looking between the helpless child and the Vastolord. It decided to take a chance and lunged for the boy. In an instant, the snake lost its head as the empty hollow decapitated it. He was curious about the young boy, the first interesting thing since he discovered his home, and wanted to learn more about him. The small, orange-haired child, sleeping on the desert sands without any knowledge of the danger he was in. The hollow was patient, so he sat next to the boy, watching and waiting. More hollows came, the smart ones left while the rest were killed by the Vastolord. Hours passed until the orange-haired child started to move. He moaned and squirmed on the desert sands as he slowly woke. The two locked eyes with each other, green gazing into brown as the hollow waited. Instead of screaming or running or attacking, the child simply sat up and spoke. The boy said to the human bat hollow. He waited for a response, but got none from the being. He asked, trying to get a reaction from the bat. He knew he should be afraid, but he felt no danger from the humanoid hollow. No anger, hunger, nothing, so the child felt no need to be afraid. He spoke to the hollow again and again, his mouth moving in different ways every time, but the hollow did not react for he could not hear. Just then, Ichigo saw the tree of sharp spines behind the bat and got an idea. He stood up and took the hollow by the hand, surprising the lone white being by the lack of fear or distrust in the boy, and pulled him closer to the tree. Once in front of it, the human broke off a needle and began to write in the sand. The symbols looked familiar to the hollow as he soon began to read the words being written in the sand. My name is Ichigo. Can you read this? The now named Ichigo offered the improvised stylus to the bat. The hollow took the tool hesitantly and tried to copy what Ichigo did. After a few attempts, the began to come naturally as he wrote a single, neatly written phrase. Yes. He looked back to Ichigo who was smiling up to him. Are you not afraid? The hollow wrote into the ground, offering the needle back to Ichigo. The boy shook his head before writing a new sentence. Why should I be? He returned the needle to the bat. I'm different. The hollow wrote. I've always been alone because of that. He returned his gaze to Ichigo who stared right back. Then the boy closed his eyes and released a heavy pulse of his Ryutsu. The hollow's eyes widened as he felt the mixed energies in that pulse. Dark and light, ordered and chaotic, hollow and full, it was a paradox of itself. He found something amazing, something opposite of himself. He found himself to be one with nothingness, never any desires or cravings. He found something that held substance, fullness, a meaningful existence. Ichigo wrote something down, something the hollow never once considered. What's your name? A simple question, one that never once crossed his mind in the centuries of his existence. He was without a name, he simply existed. Until he was asked that question and a name came to his mind. Ulquiorra Cipher. Time passed from that meeting. Ichigo worked on accessing his own hollow powers while Ulquiorra protected the hybrid in his training. Never eating, never stopping his sentinel watch of his lone companion in the world. They talked, they interacted, Ulquiorra flew them through the air while Ichigo told him about the living world. Ichigo learned to passively sustain himself on the ambient reishi in the air of Hueco Mundo, but was struggling with the one important ability he needed. He was working on creating a Garganta when Ulquiorra finally asked him. What are you trying to do, Ichigo? I'm trying to make a way home to continue my training. There's a really bad guy I'm supposed to fight when I'm strong enough. Ichigo wrote out in the sands. If he's not stopped, everything will be destroyed. Ulquiorra watched Ichigo's face, watching the continuous shift of focused determination and childish innocence. He took the needle back and wrote out a different question. Is that your purpose? The hollow asked, never leading a meaningful life and just existing. Shook his head and wrote his simple response. It's something I want to do. The young hybrid wrote. I want to protect all I can. Ulquiorra watched Ichigo as the boy smiled at him. Ulquiorra kept staring at Ichigo for a few more seconds before standing up and tearing open a Garganta. Ichigo stood up in amazement of the portal between dimensions, only to be picked up by the bat and pulled inside the portal. He then created a pathway for them to walk and gestured for Ichigo to lead. Hours of running passed until Ichigo found his way back to the world of the living. The two were on the streets as Ichigo looked around in amazement. He took Ulquiorra's hand and started to trace out the words on the hollow's hand. Ulquiorra didn't feel it but he recognized the pattern by sight. Thank you Ulquiorra. Come on. He tried to pull the Vastolord along, but for the first time since meeting, Ulquiorra pulled back. No. This is where we part ways. He told his only companion. I'm a hollow. I do not belong in this world. Ichigo looked up to the bat with hurt in his eyes, but didn't let the tears flow. He needed to be strong. Will we ever see each other again? The boy asked the white being. His expression never changed once since they met. Maybe someday. He told the child Ichigo. I'd like to find my own purpose if I have one. Ichigo reached out to Ulquiorra's face and touched him, past the broken part of his mask he never knew was there. In his shock, Ichigo pulled Ulquiorra into a hug. The stunned hollow didn't move until Ichigo released him and said something Ulquiorra still did not hear, but guessed the meaning. Good, bye. Go. He forced out of the part of his mouth that was exposed before fading back into Hueco Mundo. Present day. It's good to finally meet you again. Ulquiorra said with an almost invisible smile as Ichigo slowly remembered their first encounter. You did a good job hiding your progress from me and Lord Aizen. He scanned over Ichigo again, trying to get a sense of the hybrid's power. Have you gotten control of your hollow powers? Ichigo was about to answer when Ishine spoke up. Ichigo, do you know this guy? The father demanded, wanting to know what secrets his son kept. Is he the one that kidnapped you as a kid? Ichigo shook his head, getting control over himself again. No. He's the one that protected me when I accidentally ended up in Hueco Mundo. Ichigo replied quickly. It was when my hollow powers started fluctuating the first time. I said I was merely teleported outside, I really ended up in Hueco Mundo. And he said while pointing to Ulquiorra, is the hollow that protected me while I was vulnerable. Ulquiorra Sifur, last time I saw you said you were looking for your purpose. I wandered for a long time until I met with Lord Aizen. Ulquiorra responded. He made me an errand car, broke me free from my isolation. My path is to follow. Yami pulled himself back up and was about to charge until Ulquiorra threatened him. Interrupt this Yami, and I will break you. The giant scoffed, but stayed where he was. So, you're my enemy. Ichigo concluded, feeling conflicted about fighting his old friend. And you're okay with this? Ulquiorra looked at him with the same, blank, empty expression. I told you Ichigo. I'm a hollow, and you chose to be a soul reaper. This is nature. The bat said as he stepped back. Go ahead Yami. He told his companion, who smirked and charged at Ichigo. Fine then. Ichigo muttered as Yami brought his fist down creating a dust cloud as his fist connected. He was chuckling at the ease and fun of crushing his smaller opponent as the dust slowly settled, only to reveal Ichigo blocking the attack with ease, his veins pulsing with Reishi. If Aizen wants to see the power that will crush his army, I'll show him. Limit 1, Release. The air itself shook with the sudden increase in power, Ulquiorra's eyes widened slightly while Yami seemed to struggle with breathing for a moment. Ishine sighed and thanked his luck that Ichigo was given free rein to release his first seal, otherwise his mountain of paperwork would keep growing. There was a series of pops as Ichigo clenched his fists, then brought his hands down, forcing open Yami's guard who took a strong uppercut to his jaw. Impressive. Ulquiorra whispered as his companion was launched into the air. To think this is the same Ichigo. As Yami was back down, 20 feet away from where he previously stood, Ichigo flashed over to the falling Eren car. To anyone else, Ichigo simply axe-kicked the large hollow into the ground. Ishine and Ulquiorra saw Ichigo slam his knee into Yami's back first and then executing said axe-kick before the hollow got too high. After cratering Yami into the dirt, he turned around and headed back toward his father. That better be one of your disposable grunts Ulquiorra. Ichigo growled, knowing that Yami was slowly pulling himself out of the earth. Speed and skill was never Yami's forte. The white bat said, his tone as empty as ever. Strength and durability, however, is. He said, just as Yami rose back up. You little bastard. He growled in anger, his hand resting on his Zanpakuto. Lord Aizen wanted me to test you, but he wouldn't mind if I killed you as well. He roared before charging a Zero Blast. Die. He roared as he fired the torrent of energy at the hybrid. Ichigo sighed as he brought his hand up and blocked the blast, the energy spraying off like water. Ichigo focused on the Zero's Reishi and began to pull on it like he does with Quincy abilities. Slowly, he took control of Yami's Zero while charging one of his own. Yami and Ulquiorra watched in shock as Ichigo held the concentrated ball of twisting energies. Not even sparing a glance at his opponent, Ichigo aimed the ball skyward and released the Zero. Zero double! Ichigo whispered, launching the blast harmlessly. I'm not going to kill you yet, Yami. I want to embarrass you. Ichigo said, looking at the large Aaron car like he was an ant. So next time, Aizen will send someone worth my time. As soon as the shock wore off, he went black to glaring at the hybrid. Ulquiorra recognized what Yami was going to do next and acted. In rage, Yami yelled out, pulling out his sword. "Ira!" he called, only to notice too late that his arm was missing. He looked down to see Ulquiorra in front of him, holding the severed arm. Ulquiorra! What the he dash? He was about to ask before the bat punched a hole into the brute's stomach. It's clear you cannot beat him right now. Ulquiorra told his companion. And if I didn't stop you, you would have caused Lord Aizen more trouble. He wants Karakura town in stable condition. He said before opening a Garganta. We're returning, now. He almost growled, reminding the giant which one of them called the shots. Yami hesitated out of fear of the smaller Aaron car before walking through the portal. Ulquiorra! Ichigo called out, stopping the white hollow. What's your rank? The hybrid asked, making his old companion face him. Ichigo opened his Shiakusho to reveal his Squad 1 and reforming Squad 15 seals. I was fighting at 60%, just so you know. The two continued to stare at each other before Ulquiorra responded. I am ranked 4th and Yami is 10th. He opened his white robes to reveal his number. I'll be sure to let Lord Aizen know not to send you any more trash. He said as the barrier closed, leaving the father and son duo. So how strong is Ulquiorra? Ishine asked after a period of silence. Do you remember? He's the strongest hollow I know. Ichigo answered his captain. A Vastolord. We need to report this. Las noches. Ulquiorra made his way to the meeting room where his master of fellow Aaron Carr had been waiting. He dismissed Yami to get patched up because he wasn't necessary for this part. He had seen everything and his eyes never lied to him. He made his way to Aizen's throne, passing his fellow Espada with little regard. Some were interested in what he had to show, others didn't care too much, but only one had his attention. The Shinigami that made them Aaron Carr, Lord Aizen. Well, Ulquiorra? The traitor asked his loyal subordinate. What have you to show us? The bat wordlessly took out his left eye and crushed it, letting the specialized dust of his Solita Vista touch his allies and replay his memories. So, 60%, and he soundly defeated Yami. Aizen said after analyzing the memories. And you stopped him before he could use his resurrection because that would cause too much damage. Good judgment, Ulquiorra. He praised his subordinate. But instead of killing him, you ran away. A condescending deep tone echoed throughout the room. Or is it because you still think of him as a friend? Ulquiorra turned to see the cocky fool, open jacket with lean muscles and a hole in his stomach, light blue hair, and green lining under his eyes. If I was there, I would have blasted him to bits. Ulquiorra regarded the lower-ranked Espada with his ever-present stare. He's in the way, so it'd be best to kill him now, right? He called out to the rest of the Aaron Carr. I will not fight Ichigo Kurosaka so long as Karakura town is the arena. The fourth Espada said with finality. If we did, we would destroy the entire city. Or have you forgotten the significance of that place, Grimjo? Then we assassinate him, said the man at Grimjo's side. He had a long face with his hollow fragment resting on his head and extending to a point on the right while it covered the upper left side of his face. A small, fast team to kill every major member of that Squad 15. Kill this Ichigo fast before he becomes too much to handle. Some seemed to be in agreement until Aizen called for order. While this does raise some concerns of your loyalty, it also explains why you always volunteered to spy on him. He said, gazing down on one of his best. I leave the matter of Ichigo Kurosaki to you, Ulquiorra. Do not disappoint me. He commanded as Ulquiorra bowed his head, purposefully ignoring Grimjo's glare. Everyone else, tread lightly. Ichigo Kurosaki is not to be taken lightly. Urahara Shoten/Squad 15 base. From what we can conclude from Ulquiorra, there's at least 4 Vastolord Arrancar in Aizen's army. Ishine reported to the head captain and his colleagues. Until further notice, unless forced otherwise, Ishine was to attend via video conference to the captain's meetings. The appearance of the Arrancar put everything on high alert, and Squad 15 was the front lines for the Shinigami. It's very likely that each Arrancar has a special ability not unlike our own Zanpakutos, so caution is still advised, sir. Yamamoto and the more inquisitive captains pondered on these revelations. You should have had Ichigo kill that Yami Hollow. Yamamoto grumbled, worried about his student's judgment. And that Ulquiorra, are you sure Ichigo will fight him? All eyes turned to Ishine as he thought for a moment. These Arrancar seem different from regular hollows. He finally said after a second. But to what extent, I don't know. Aizen probably figures that no less than a Vastolord Arrancar will be needed to fight Ichigo, which is something that could level the city. Either way, Aizen won't plan another attack for a while. Ichigo will probably try to turn a few to our side, and he might very well succeed. Ishine then met every single gaze from the other captains. But my son will not waver. He will do what is necessary. Yamamoto seemed to regard Ishine for another few moments before nodding. Very well. Stay on guard for the next attack, Captain Ishine. He warned, about to call an end to the meeting before Urahara said one last piece. And if you could, please send me some specimens. The eccentric inventor spoke excitedly. Mayuri and I are eager to see what we can find. A small shiver went through everyone as the feed was cut. Ishine let out a relieved sigh. One thing I didn't miss about being a captain is how tense things can get. He whined while Hiyori came back in, eating a bag of chips. Oh boo-hoo. She said through her snack. That cow Rangiku told me about how you barely did that job before. Ishine looked back at her, surprised by the contact between his former lieutenant and his comms officer. She calls twice a week to try to get a date with Ichigo. Says he's being a poor boyfriend. She shrugged as she took over her seat again. Now leave, Baldy, we've got stuff to do. She yelled, throwing her empty bag at Ishine's face. He pouted and left, grumbling about paperwork, leaving Hiyori alone. She began typing a few things on her keyboard, accessing a file called ICOA. Soon, the monitor camera activated and she began recording. Video log number 6, Hiyori Saragaki. The next day, Tatsuki and Ishine. The school day came and went with no incident. A small hollow here and there, but nothing major, nothing important. The officers of Squad 15 were all heading home for the night, except for one fireball. Tatsuki missed her captain's order to head home, her mind preoccupied with other matters. Ishine saw this and decided to step in. Tatsuki, he said, making her jump in surprise. It's late, you should head home. Unlike most of the squad, you guys still have school to worry about. She let her head drop and let out a sigh. Just as she was about to speak, Ishine interrupted her. You're worried about yesterday, aren't you? He asked, making her look at him in shock. I'm a father of 3 and I've been around for a long time, Tatsuki. I've picked up a few things in life. He said with a fatherly smile. Go ahead and tell me. She stared at him for a while before looking down. I froze. She said, uncertain and worried. I'm supposed to be one of the leaders, one of the people that can stand by her friends, and I froze in the face of the enemy. She turned up her gaze to her captain, looking like a scared child for the first time in her life. How do you do it? She pleaded. How does Ichigo, Urayu, or even Chad? How can you stay so calm in the face of stuff like that? She asked, tears coming to her eyes. Ishine sat down next to her and looked the martial artist straight in the eyes. Listen, Tatsuki, he started in his dad voice, I'll be honest. Your only life or death experience was when that hollow swarm attacked. And even then, you were so focused on other matters that you didn't focus on it. But you've had time to calm down, and you've learned that while you're powerful for a human, you are still human. He told her, keeping her gaze locked. You've learned to charge your Reishi into fire attacks and you're a capable martial artist, but there are things out there that are stronger than you. Stronger than Ichigo right now. But they've faced that kind of danger often while you've only done so one time. By all accounts, you shouldn't even be a seated officer. She looked at him with betrayal and hurt in her eyes, but he held fast. But you're still here. Because Ichigo believes in you. Orium believes in you. Yuruaki and Swaifon both think you have what it takes. Just like me. Slowly the hurt melted away from her eyes. We have the faith, you just need to have some in yourself and prove you are capable. He said before the alarms started going off. Preferably later, but sometimes the enemy are jackasses. He said as he went out the door, Tatsuki just following automatically. Once outside, they saw a tall, thin man with a long face and an odd hollow mask with a large, fat man whose face was half covered by a skull mask. Orium. So, can you explain something? The barrier maiden was making her way home, conversing with her spirits about her powers. Why did you say you're my powers if you're my brother's contracted spirits? Was anything I did really me? She asked nervously, concerned about whether she was a help or a burden to her friends. Oddly enough, it was Tsubaki who explained things to her. Of course it was Orium. He said in a calm tone, surprising the other sprites and their mistress. Your brother contracted us, but ordered us to be your Shikigami until you were ready to begin your training. Doing so put us in a mutual relationship where you supplied the power, we supply the action. In short, yes, you do have the power Orium. Now it's time to get the training. Let's make that later and surviving is today. Shuno said, just as Orium sensed something coming at her. Santen Kes-shun. She yelled, just as a man with a bulky helmet shaped like a hammerhead shark's head and bandages on the right side tried to stab her with his hand. The shield held him off, making him jump back and smile, showing of a disturbing row of square teeth. Looks like I'll be having some fun. He said before laughing. Chad. So, Aaron Carr I take it? Chad asked, on his way home when he appeared. He was larger than Chad, long red hair on one side and shaved black on the other. His hollow mask looked like a pair of sunglasses resting on his nose. Yep, and I'm here to kill you. He said, smirking confidently at the Fullbringer. Sato rolled his shoulders and stretched a little. You can try. He said before flaring his Ryutsu. Uryu. Uryu was making his way back home himself, contemplating a letter he found in his locker. We are not your enemies. We are kin. When you're ready to speak with us, go to the Funfeetfeld. It was obviously left to him by one of the Quincy that came to his school, but what is their aim? If they wanted to recruit them, why did they attack Ichigo twice? He needed to get answers but he couldn't go in there blind. He would wait until this matter with the Aaron Carr has settled down before informing Ishine and Ichigo. In the meantime, he'd crush this blonde, lean hybrid that got in his way. Hello brother, the Aaron Carr said in a sarcastic tone, I'm here to kill ya. Uryu looked over his opponent, long blonde hair, hollow mask that seemed like a broken helmet, and he already annoyed the Quincy. I'm positive that was meant to be threatening, he said while adjusting his glasses, but it only works if you're actually threatening. Ichigo. Ichigo was the only one that still patrolled the area. He was sitting on the edge of one of the higher buildings when he felt the 6 Aaron Carr enter the city, watched as they all went to his allies, and waited for the strongest of them to come to him. His patience was rewarded when a blue-haired lean-looking punk with a hollow mask covering the right half of his jaw. So you're Ichigo Kurosaki? He asked, condescendingly at the hybrid. The one that made Ulquiorra run off. Ichigo sighed as he got up. This better be worth my time. He grumbled under his breath. And who are you? Name's Grimjo Jaeger Jacques. Espada number 6. Ichigo cracked his neck as he prepared to fight. Adorable. He said, making Grimjo glare at him. Illustrated Guide to Soul Reapers. Plans for the SMA. After the legitimate change of the Shinigami Men's Association's hierarchy, i.e. hostile takeover, Uryu got to planning some big changes for the association. First order was removing the dress code of sunglasses and open jackets. This met some resistance, which met Uriu's fist, which killed the protests rather quickly. Next order was to restore their budget. Uriu planned on doing so by investigating what the Women's Association did to get their current budget. He was less than happy when he finished his research. Naneo. The Quincy growled in fury. You've made yourself a terrible enemy in me. The rest of the association cowered in fear of their treasurer and real leader. Time to fight fire with fire, he said, just as his phone rang. Yes, Ichigo? It's for the club, do it. No, I don't think they'll mind. I don't care if you don't want to do it. We're in the red because Iba is a spineless idiot. Just do it, you whore. He roared before hanging up. The rest of the men were looking at him in confusion. Uriu, did you just pimp out my son? Ishine said, turning serious and burning with anger. Anger, that did not affect the Quincy. Modeling for an advertising firm, he said, brushing off the aggression. Chocolate-covered strawberries. Everyone just stared in confusion as he filed more reports. They decided to never speak of it again. Chapter 43, Failed Assault. Squad 15 Base. So what are looking at here, Hiri? Lisa asked as her old comrade came out of the monitoring room to join the rest of the squad. With the arrival of the Aaron car, Squad 15 was being sent out to assess the threat and damage control. Data gathering for preparations against the next attack. 6 Aaron car, 1 is clearly in the range of the 2 that came before and the other 5 are far weaker. The foul-mouthed wizard answered. Comparing riot so puts this group as 1 Ajichas and 5 Jillians. They exited the small shop as the grunts dispersed to do their jobs. The wizards looked up to their captain and 5th seat preparing for their battle against the invaders. If I had to make any bets, I'd put my money on our guys, she said, fully confident in her allies. Our ladies, on the other hand, lack the same kind of strength and experience. Lisa asked, already knowing the answer. Shall we clean the rust off our swords then, Hiri? The two looked at each other before smirking. Let's see how they do before we rescue them, the tomboy suggested before turning toward Orium's direction. I'll save the princess, she said before disappearing with her shunpo, leaving Lisa to watch the fight alone. Orium vs Deroy. Who are you? Orium asked as she quickly shifted into her fighting stance while the Shunrika swirled around her. Her opponent snickered madly, showing a sadistic delight in the coming fight. Or, in his mind, his brutal killing of a weak little girl. Deroy, Aaron Carr #16. He yelled out, charging at the barrier maiden with the intent of cutting her down with his hands. No need to introduce yourself, you're going to die. Orium narrowly dodged the swing, caught his wrist and belt line of his hakama, and threw the Aaron Carr into the wall. Katanzan Shun, she yelled out, shooting Tsubaki at the Aaron Carr. The result was the small sprite hitting the Aaron Carr like a baseball. The impact was there, but it didn't pierce his flesh. Tsubaki returned to his master's side while the Aaron Carr got back up. Orium hit it, but she was starting to get nervous. She still didn't like fighting, preferring to be the main healer, and ended up neglecting her training since she and her friends invaded Soul Society. Focus! Tsubaki yelled at her. Our powers are supplied by your will. Now get that fighting spirit. As he said that, the Aaron Carr was getting back up, rubbing his stomach where Tsubaki hit him. I actually felt that, he said with a grunt. How about I return the favor? He grinned as he unsheathed his blade and charged again. Shitenko-shun, Orium called out, creating her reflective barrier. The moment his blade touched it, the kinetic force was pushed back and he got a small cut on his face. Looks like that works. Time to bring that out. Kentenko-shun. She held out her hand as the sprites realigned into a sword. She did a few swings and twirls to refamiliarize herself with the blade. Let's try this. She defended as he struck again, only to meet the same results as before. He attacks, she defends, the force is reflected back at him and he gets injured. After a while, she is exhausted while he is covered in small cuts and bloodied, but not tired. That's it, he growled, no longer smiling. I'm done playing. He removed the bandage from his right eye and revealed a charging ball of energy. Orium braced herself, ready to change her sword to a shield when she heard a familiar yell. "Don't just stand there, dumbass!" She heard Hiyori yell as a sandal flew past her and slammed into Deroy's face. Then the wizard herself appeared in front of the Aaron car, who was stumbling back for the unexpected footwear fastball, grabbed her sandal and whacked the Aaron car into the air with it. Disregarding the altar hollow for the moment, the monkey girl then turned her attention on Orium. "What the hell, princess?" she yelled at the timid barrier maiden. "You do realize you're in a street, right? With houses on either side that people live in, correct?" she demanded, making Orium nod like a frightened child. "Then move the fight so others don't get involved. I had it handled," Orium defended, standing up to the shorter girl. Hiyori had the nerve to look amused. "No, princess," she said as Deroy reappeared with a powered Zero Blast ready, "this is handling it." Hiyori quickly reappeared next to the Aaron car with her hollow mask and Zanpakuto out, decapitating Deroy in an instant. Orium watched the cold execution in shock, feeling her stomach turn at the killing of something that looked so human. "You're still too gentle, too soft. Work on that so you don't burden the rest of the squad." She gathered up the remains so she could preserve the former Aaron car for Kisuke and Mayuri's experiments. "You're a seated officer, act like it," she said before disappearing, leaving a stunned Orium just before she vomited up her dinner. Chad vs Idrid. "My name is Yasutara Sato," Chad said as he stretched his arms and cracked his knuckles. "Fourth seat of Squad 15. You." The larger hollow smiled in anticipation. "I'm Aaron car number 13, E-." He paused suddenly, almost as if he just considered something. "Never mind. It'd be a waste to give my name when I'm just going to kill a lowly fourth seat," he said, smirking confidently at Chad. "That's rude, but fair," the Fullbringer said before appearing directly in front of the Aaron car and slammed his fist into his face. With a resounding crack, he was sent flying into the distance and onto a deserted road. As he was tumbling and rolling, Chad caught up to him and punched his head into the ground, leaving a crater and him embedded into the earth. He groaned as he slowly opened his eyes, only to see a foot stomping on his head. After a few stomps, Chad grabbed the Aaron car's ankle, yanked him out of the hole and slammed him face first, making him bounce off the asphalt, before punching him in the chin and sent him flying again. "Since I'm going to be killing a lowly Aaron car," he said before activating his Fullbring, the armor covering his arms. The Aaron car got up, spitting out a couple of teeth and blood while parts of his mask fragment fell apart. "I think I've shown to be able to punch through your arrow, so shall we try this again? I met a man who said it was a courtesy to give your name before a fight." "Very well. Awaken, Volcanica," he called out, holding his blade horizontally before it turned into light and shot into the ground. The area around him erupted into a pillar of flame as bits of magma attached themselves to his arms, reforming into massive arms with protrusions on his shoulder and exhaust holes in the middle of those protrusions. "Idrid Lions. That is the name of the Aaron car that will kill you, Yasutara Sato." He saw Chad's shocked expression and chuckled. "This is what happens when Aaron car release their Zanpakuto, their resurrection. We gain back our abilities and our former forms, increasing our power far beyond a Soul Reaper." Chad met his opponent's gaze with a glare. "So this is the peak of your power?" he asked, surprising the Aaron car. "Then I suppose I've got nothing to worry about." Chad then charged his arms with Ryotsu, taking the form of electricity around his left fist and fire from his right shoulder. "Because I haven't reached mine yet." "Is this your Shikai?" Idrid asked, clenching his fists in anger at being underestimated. "Idrid, I don't have a Zanpakuto," Chad said, pulling his fist back. "I'm a Fullbringer." They charged at each other, concentrated Reishi against concentrated fire, and when they met, they exploded furiously. Intense waves of heat hit Chad constantly while Idrid's arms slowly crack and break. Eventually Chad began to weaken as he felt his flesh burn from the volcanic heat of the Aaron car, something Idrid began to notice. "It doesn't matter if you're a Soul Reaper or not," he said before punching a tunnel of flames at his opponent, "you will still lose here." The fires died to reveal a smoking and badly burned Chad, breathing heavily from his attacks. "Thank you for the fight, Yasutara Sato. I'll remember you fondly. No, Chad thought in defiance, remembering his promise to friends. I am the unbreakable shield of the front lines. I protect my friends. He focused on those memories and desires until he exploded, forcing Idrid back from the sheer force. As the dust settled, Chad's right arm resembled a shield and a long spike protruding from his left shoulder. This is the end, Idrid. Chad said before charging at the Aaron car again. He raised his arms to block, but the cracks were spreading and bleeding. El Directo. Chad roared as he slammed his right fist against the large white arms and destroying them like loose, dry clay and leaving Idrid to be hit with a torrent of energy. The Aaron car dropped to his knees as Chad readied the final strike, electrical reishi cackling around his fingertips of his left hand. La Muert. He whispered as he punched Idrid just below his hollow hole, leaving a skull imprint on the ground behind him. The Aaron car coughed up blood as he felt his insides turn to mush, letting out a weak laugh. I'm glad I heard your name. Yasutara Sato. He said before falling dead to the ground. Chad watched his fallen foe for a couple of seconds, offering a silent prayer to the dead, before his squad members recovered the body and took him back to the base. Tatsuki vs Nakim. Ishine and Tatsuki watched the two Aaron car as the grunts of their squad went about to minimize and undo the damage of the fights occurring around them. A series of large flashes and differing ryotsus colliding with one another gave a sense that the fights began and some were more questionable than others. Orium and Chad were holding their own, Uriah seems to be playing, and he stopped checking on his son, confident that he would be fine. The Hollows made no move to attack the other Soul Reapers, focusing only on the seated officers. Tatsuki, you fight the big guy. Ishine ordered the girl, making her look at him cautiously. He's the weaker one. Don't worry, you'll be fine. She was about to say something before deciding to go with her captain's command. Ishine jumped to meet the Aaron car on level air to talk better. So, are we exchanging pleasantries before we try to kill each other? The long-faced Hollow smirked, confident that their side would win. I suppose we should give the courtesy before we kill you. He said with a polite little bow that was clearly condescending. I am Shalong Kaofeng, Aaron car #11. Nakim Gurndina, #14. The larger Aaron car said in a low tone, before descending to stand in front of Tatsuki. Ishine turned his attention back to the helmeted Aaron car. Captain of Squad 15, Ishine Kurosaki. The captain responded. She's Tatsuki Arisawa, my fifth seat. So how does this numbering system work? He asked, keeping his cool. Strength. Order of creation. Yes. To both. Shalong responded. The top 10 Aaron car, the Espada, are ranked by their power while the rest are numbered by the order of their creation. He smirked, expecting to crush the captain's will with his next statement. Aside from the Espada with us, I'm the strongest Aaron car. Ishine responded, with a deeply disappointed sigh. Really? That's a bummer. He said, with a bored look on his face. I'm going to get rusty if all I fight are weaklings and do that stupid paperwork. Those weird guys in that mansion were just not the warm-up. He turned his attention to his future daughter and elected to watch her fight. Shalong grew furious at the blatant disregard of him as an opponent. You should NEV-, he started, attempting to cut Ishine down from behind, only to feel an elbow knock all the air out of him. I don't need to release my seal against you. He said before knocking the man out with a swift chop to the neck. I'm trying to watch the fight, so shut up. He focused on the battle, the fireball dancing around the large hollow with grace, but it looked like he was outlasting her. Take this. She yelled out, coating her arm in reishi fire that did burn the Aaron car, but he powered through it to strike at her. He thrust his palm at her, she twisted out of the way and slammed her elbow into his gut. He stumbled as she flipped to kick him in the face and deliver a fiery fist to her enemy. He was enveloped in the purifying flames, and when they faded, he was nowhere to be seen. During the attack, he used his Sonido to get behind her and kick her into the ground. She tumbled on the ground and got into a kneeling position, just in time to block another kick. She grunted against the pressure, but she took the small window to calm herself and focus on her power. This was her first lone life or death struggle, and she refused to fall. She took a breath and flexed her body, releasing a strong pulse of Reishi and strengthened the flames in her hands and feet. What the Deshnakim asked as he stumbled back. Tatsuki kicked his knee directly in the joint and proceeded to pummel him with her burning hands and feet. Burning assault. She yelled out as she threw her fists out rapidly, creating a snaking path of fire with small fanning bursts with every strike. After a few hundred strikes he was standing in a daze, drifting between conciseness as Tatsuki panted from exertion and punched him one more time. Fireball strike! She yelled as she buried her fist in his gut and turned him into a fireball until he was flat on his back, barely alive from the abuse. Behind him was Lisa, who unsheathed her blade. Smash, Higuro Tanbo. An instant later, a large blade similar to a monk's spade cut off Nakim's head. The blade was as long as his torso with a staff too long to properly wield in small spaces. Lisa was dressed in her sailor outfit in a look of business on her face. My apologies for cutting this short, but the other fights are wrapping up and our sensors recognize another powerful signature coming this way. We need to retrieve as many samples as we can. She explained as Ishine came down. She bowed respectfully to her captain before sealing her Zapakuto and carrying his body away. Tatsuki stared in shock by the ease that Lisa handled the matter and the brutality of killing. Before she became a wizard, Lisa was a lieutenant. Ishine explained to the surprised martial artist. After that, she only grew in strength and ability. Same with Yuri. In terms of ranks, they should be either third at most and fifth at least. He spoke with no sense of humor in his tone, letting Tatsuki take in the expectations he made in making her the fifth seat. We're facing war, Tatsuki. Are you ready for that? You can't expect to spare your opponents like before. Uriah vs Yford. Uriah disappeared in a burst of speed, appearing far overhead of the Aaron car, and released a barrage of fast but weak arrows. The Aaron car dodged the attack and met his opponent in the air, exactly as Uriah wanted. The two enemies glared at each other while standing in the air, the Aaron car already unsheathing his blade while Uriah had his bow at the ready. Uriah Ishida, third seat of Squad 15. Uriah said, keeping his calm as he conjured a few bolts. Yford Grands, Aaron car #15. The blonde hollow replied. I'll be killing you, brother. He readied his blade while Uriah scowled viciously. Do not use such familiar terms with me. He pulled his bow back. It's disgusting. He released the bolts and began to jump around, forcing his opponent to twist, turn, and block rapidly, almost dizzily to keep up with the Quincy. If you want to stand a chance, you have my permission to do whatever Shikai knockoff you Aaron car have. Grands glared at the arrogance of the Quincy but smirked, believing that Uriah's arrogance will be his undoing. If you're in such a hurry to die, then skewer. Del Toro. The hollow called out before armor coated his upper body, looking like a bull's head and torso with long jagged horns. You regretting your choice now, brother? He asked, ready to impale Uriah with his horns. Uriah merely raised an eyebrow, confused that this is supposed to intimidate him. Huh, neat. The Quincy said before hold out his bow and shifting it to an intricate design that is unrecognizable as a bow, more like a framework for stained glass. He held the bow to his side casually before shaking it slightly. Toro, Toro. He called out lazily, making Yford grit his teeth. You still mock me? He roared as he charged, crossing the distance in an instant. He was fast, but not fast enough. Yes, I do. Uriah said, just before twisting around the charge and letting his opponent run off harmlessly. When Yford turned, Uriah was goading him on once again. This repeated until he managed to clip the bow with his horn, making the Quincy spin into a collision with the bull until he rolled off the large beast. Not so funny now, brother? He mocked, ignoring a slight pain in his back. Uriah righted himself and merely continued his actions. He paid for it by getting his weapon clipped again as he spun over the Aaron car. He turned back to see Uriah abandon the shield bow for a pair of silver and black rods that gained blades of black and blue reishi. It was then that Yford recognized what Uriah was doing. During his spins, he shot small arrows into the Aaron car's back. Now was time for the next stage. What do you think this is, brother? He yelled in fury. A bullfight, obviously. Uriah said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I've been spending way too much time around Ichigo. He thought as Iford made one last charge. That's not funny. He roared, intent on skewering the Quincy that was humiliating him. But before he even got close, Uriah was behind him and his head was no longer attached to his body. Indeed. The Quincy conceded, reattaching the rods to his belt. I was bored from the start. The Aaron car fell dead to the ground and Uriah focused on the two figures still fighting. How long are you going to play Ichigo? Ichigo vs Grimjo. The two already began their fight. The moment that introductions between them was over, they were fighting. Ichigo already released his first limiter and they were only fighting with their martial arts. Grimjo was a street brawler, hitting hard and hitting fast and using his ability and instinct. A better street fighter than Ichigo was used to, nothing he couldn't keep up with. As it was, they were more for getting a feel of the other's ability. As Grimjo felt his fraction drop one by one, he decided to kick it up a notch. Hey, I prefer my fights to be one-on-one. He suddenly said after they separated for a bit. So don't go asking for help. Ichigo matched his opponent's glare with the same intensity. You think I'll need help kicking your ass? He said, just before they both drew their blades and clashed against each other. Sparks flew from their swords as they resumed their battle, the ringing of their blades echoing throughout Karakura. Grimjo grew more and more angry with the calm look Ichigo had on his face, like he was in control this entire time. That he wasn't even exerting too much effort, and it was pissing him off. He was a king. The strongest. He knew he made the right call to try to assassinate him, but he was doubting he was capable of doing that. I think that's enough of a warm-up. Ichigo said, jumping back and swinging his blade a few times. You going to use that? What did that guy Chad Fought call it? Resurrection. Grimjo was furious with the casual ease Ichigo was taking this, but he'd match that game. Tell ya what. You break that second limiter, and maybe I'll let you see mine. He goaded, letting his arrogance get the best of him. Ichigo merely shrugged. Suit yourself. He said before appearing before Grimjo and kicking him in the side of the head. The Aaron car was sent flying until Ichigo appeared before him and struck again, repeating the process until it became like a bizarre game of pinball for the hybrid. Eventually, Grimjo was able to lash out with his blade. Ichigo, believing in his defensive ability, tried to catch the blade with only his arrow protecting him. There was noticeable resistance but the blade cut through Ichigo's left hand, leaving only his thumb. Ichigo jumped back to assess the damage while Grimjo took pleasure in the small victory. You're powerful, but it looks like I can still cut you. He said with a grin, despite feeling battered and beaten. He watched in shock as Ichigo regenerated from the injury. Momentary lapse in judgment. Ichigo said, testing his hand. You won't get another chance. Sensei is going to be pissed with me. Grimjo raised his blade and placed his hand along the midpoint, like he was about to claw his sword. You want my resurrection? He asked in a low growl. Fine. Grind. Pan dash. Dot. A mischievous tone called out. That's enough fun Grimjo. Grimjo froze as he slowly looked behind to see the ever-smiling Jin, wearing a new white Shiakusho. I don't believe Aizen gave you permission to launch this attack. Grimjo was about to say something, but Ichimaru opened his eyes very slightly, freezing both him and Ichigo with the silent intimidation. Though, this assault may prove useful yet. It's clear our ranks could use some obedience training. He said, leaving the threat to hang there. Wordlessly, Jin flicked his wrist in the air and opened a garganta. Grimjo slyly went into it while Jin's smiling face met Ichigo's scowl, before he started laughing. I must admit Ichigo, it's amusing to see the ever-cool Aizen lose to his anger. He is not taking these losses well. Being tricked with the Hogyaku, your growth, and you made expendable soldiers into needed assets by how much his calculations came off. He said, losing himself in a fit of giggles before stopping suddenly. Remember, he knows how to hurt if needed. He said without his smile as he disappeared through the portal. Ichigo stayed there, watching the double agent fade from this world to the world of hollows. That was unsettling. Urahara Shoten / Captain's meeting. In the fights our squad members took part in, we got a better idea of the current strength and ability of our Arrancar enemies. Ishine informed his colleagues through a video connection. Ichigo was standing at his side, as was his privilege as the captain commander's student. It can be safely assumed that Arrancar made from Jillians are well below the average lieutenant. Unfortunately, that may change in the future if Aizen figures out a way to improve them. Well, we can take a look at the possibilities after we get those bodies your team recovered. Urahara informed them, already thinking about the possible experiments to come. Time for the grittier side of science. We are at war, we can set aside and worry about our morals when we are at peace. Yamamoto said, a small tone of weariness bleeding through the strong voice of the commander. Ichigo, join the team in escorting the bodies. You will be staying in Soul Society for a while. Yes, master. Ichigo said, bowing to his teacher. Can I ask why though? The time has come, for your wedding to Lieutenant Rukia Kukaki. Illustrated Guide to Soul Reapers. Post-Orium Fight. Diroi was stunned from the sudden sandal slap and was simply standing in a daze. Hiyori stood on the other side, ready and waiting. Finish him. A dark, ethereal voice called out. Hiyori summoned her hollow mask and was instantly at Diroi's side, quickly decapitating him with a swing of her blade. Hiyori wins. Fatality. Orium was watching from the other side, tears in her eyes. But, this was supposed to be my fight. Post-Chad fight. Chad stood over his fallen foe, offering his silent respects when his phone started vibrating. He checked the caller ID and smiled at his friend's name. He opened the phone, connecting to Kigo. Do it. He said, turning on his phone's speaker. Y'all can't handle the mother freaking, Chad. Kigo yelled out enthusiastically. Chad's so hot, Volcanicus flames can't burn him. How did you even know that? Sato asked, not expecting an answer. Post Ishine. Fight but not fight. Ishine pulled his elbow away as the Arrancar, Shalong fell to the ground unconscious. In front of the captain came a small game screen saying, plus 500 XP. You gained, a rusty dagger. Ishine looked at the screen for a few seconds before sighing dejectedly. This loot system sucks. He whined. Post-Tatsuki fight. Nakim was about to stomp on Tatsuki's head when a wide blade cut him in half horizontally. Surprise spear. Lisa called out with a triumphant smile. It's a spear you didn't know you wanted. She was still smiling as Tatsuki got up, walked over to the wizard, and threw her over her knee before spanking her with a heated palm. This left the wizard a twitching mess on the ground, whether from pain or pleasure was uncertain. Damn killstealer. Post-Uriah fight. Uriah looked over the headless remains of his opponent, deep in contemplative thought. Wondering the most damning question of all time. That's it. He said with finality. I'm having hamburgers for dinner. Post-Ichigo fight. Chapter 44, Marriage of the Clans. With Ichigo. Ichigo was making his way through the danga, carrying with him a cart containing preservation capsules that held the bodies of the defeated Arrancar inside. Seeing as he was heading into Soul Society, he was given the task of escorting the remains until Squad 12 could recover them and begin their examinations. Ichigo often wondered whether or not to kill the one known as Shalong Kaofeng, if only to spare him the suffering he'll endure with Mayuri. He forced himself to push that aside, knowing that war was not fought on morals, only power. If they wanted a chance, he would turn a blind eye to certain matters. Uriah informed him and Ishine about the matter with the Quincy's, but it would have to wait until later. They needed to prepare for either capture or assassination. Turning them was a possibility, but they'd need a situation under their complete control. Which brought his attention back to Ulquiorra, whether he could turn some of the Arrancar to their side. They did not seem to be mindless beasts that strove to quench an unceasing hunger, but aside from his friend among them they all seemed driven by the desire to destroy. He was brought out of his musings as a black cat approached him. Going to see Tatsuki, I take it? He asked, knowing that it was Yuruaki. The black cat looked up to her student and nodded. Yes, I'm done with my vacation. She said in her masculine tone. Caught up with Swafon, whipped the Onmitsukido back into shape, and spent the rest of the time trying to escape my clingy brother. She explained to the hybrid with what seemed like a tired smile. He's really clingy. I noticed. Ichigo responded, getting ready to continue on his way. She did good against her opponent the other day. I've heard. The cat had a gleam of pride in her eye. Now to make sure she does better. Also let Ishine know that the paperwork was finalized and Lisa is now his co-third seat. The old man establishes martial law, but he can't get rid of paperwork. The hybrid grumbled as he stated to leave. Records are important, Ichigo. She told him as they went their separate ways. Even I have to admit that. Ichigo continued on to the light at the end, showing him the opening to Soul Society, where his future wife was waiting for him. Byakuya and him talked a few more times after establishing the political marriage between him and Rukia about clan politics. He had few complimentary things to say about his own clan's elders. Ichigo just wished that he wouldn't be expected to be on anyone's leash, he was in a precarious enough position as it was. He went through the Senkaimon and into the Seirai, which took a massive change since the last time he was there. Huh. He said in mild surprise. Progress. He saw the citizens of the Rukon districts interacting happily with many Soul Reapers, one was even playing with a bunch of kids and another seemed to be tutoring them in harnessing Reishi. The buildings in the Rukon looked a lot better and the unease seemed to have dissipated from the atmosphere. He decided to take a chance and jumped, using his tempered control of Reishi to soar into the sky. He soon passed the point where the spirit barrier was supposed to be and took in the sights. From the view he saw a number of Shinigami acting as police officers, preventing thefts and murders, all the way to the 20th district on all sides. Jidanbo and the other gatekeepers seemed to be reassigned as prison guards because he noticed some large buildings where many people were shackled with many other Soul Reapers and punishment squad members patrolling the area. He slowly drifted back down to his original position where a small group was heading towards his cargo, which had gained a small audience. He landed just as a guy with horns and a lab coat reached the cart. Lieutenant Kurosaki. I am Akon, third seat of Squad 12. He said with a nod. We're here for the specimens. Ichigo felt uneasy referring to cognizant beings like that, living or dead, but he forced it down. Here you go, give Urahara my regards. He said as he left the group and made his way to the Kukaki Manor, where Kyokaku and Byakuya waited. Las noches. Grimmjow was furious, beaten, and humiliated by how badly his self-imposed mission went. He lost his fraction, each one losing their fight in a mostly honorable one-on-one battle, and was punished for his disobedience. He had both his arms cut off and was subjected to a defenseless beating, courtesy of the 5th Espada, Naritra Gilga. After he was thoroughly punished for his failure did Aizen allow him to have his arms returned and his rank was stripped from him. Tuan, still crippled from his fight from their escape from Soul Society, called this justice, stating that Grimmjow had no reason but to sate his own bloodlust. He wandered through the deserts of Hueco Mundo, choosing solitude to reflect on his life, determined and planning to get his vengeance against that damned hybrid. I did warn you, Grimmjow. He heard from behind, turning to see Ulquiorra standing on a dune above him. I recognized his potential long ago. Now he's had time to refine it. Most of us Arrancar are still relatively rough in comparison. Is there a point or are you just trying to piss me off? The panther growled. Ulquiorra gave him an intimidating look, freezing the fallen Espada. What are you willing to give up? The bat asked, the air becoming heavier reflecting the energy of the Vastolord. I have a secret, an ace in the hole. I have it for my eventual fight with Ichigo, but I will teach it to you if you tell me what you are willing to sacrifice for it. Grimmjow was stunned, a chance to gain power but at a cost. Would his pride allow that? How much did he hate Ichigo Kurosaki? What have I left to lose? He asked after a few seconds. I've lost my rank, my fraction, the respect of my fellow Arrancar. What else can I lose? Your desire to become king. Ulquiorra stated simply, shocking Grimmjow again. Is your desire to destroy Ichigo so great that you'd abandon your drive to be the king? Is your thirst for destruction that powerful? Grimmjow's mind was racing. The drive to become the king of Hollows was all he had left of his former group. They followed him because they believed he could become the strongest. Now here was Ulquiorra, someone that reached a point he never could before, and offering to train him at the cost of his desire to rule. Was he ready for that? Would he give up that final aspect of his old life to defeat Ichigo? I abandoned my desire to be king, for my hunger for destruction, he finally said, earning a rare smirk from the empty Aaron car. Then let's begin. Aizen's study. Aizen watched the recordings of the fights between his Heinz Squad 15 and his own Aaron car. On one hand, he was getting more data on his enemies. On the other, they've made it clear that he would need better quality soldiers. Even Jillian's would need to be brought in, after he turned them into Ajichas. He wouldn't be as angry, but his slow progress with his Hogyaku was grating on his nerves. If he had Urahara's as well, he could speed up the production of his Aaron car, even finish the one he made to stop Yamamoto. But for now, he could either focus on strengthening his forces or augmenting his Hogyaku. The small jewel pulsed in his hand, responding to its master's Ryutsu. Very well, he said after a moment of contemplation. Training it shall be. And maybe another distraction to keep them busy. He turned his focus back on the hybrid, actually smiling at the boy. Course, I do need to get you out of my way. He switched the screen over to Ichigo's sisters, coming home after a day of school. SRDI, Sub-Basement Research Lab. Urahara was watching the monitors before him with great intensity, absorbing and analyzing every scrap of data that his scans were getting. The Aaron car made it into their custody and they quickly got to work, dissecting, scanning, finding out anything they could. Mayuri got his hands dirty, digging through the insides of the dead Aaron car while Urahara performed multiple scans on the only living specimen. He promised himself he would give up on the holofication experiments that led to so much trouble, but some small parts of himself still demanded an answer to strengthen the Soul Reapers for the coming battle. The Vizards could be considered failures in that regard, as their power increase is limited to their control of their inner hollow. Ichigo was a better example of his ideal, but that was almost impossible to replicate without more and compliant Quincy. So here he was analyzing data from the other side of the barrier breakdown. That Fullbringer needs to come in for more testing, Mayuri idly stating while looking at the ruptured mess that was once Idrid. And I need to give him an earful about keeping specimens intact. Mayuri continued, but Kisuk gave him no mind. He recognized a trace energy signature that was undoubtedly from the Hogyaku, but different from his own. Still unsure about that one. Mayuri, shut up and come here. Urahara ordered his lieutenant. Mayuri removed his bloodied gloves to join Urahara, muttering about research opportunities without captain responsibilities before joining his superior. Remember the files on my Hogyaku? Of course, we went over those a million times to figure out how to seal it up, the deranged scientist said before looking at the screens and responding in surprise. And that's different. Kisuk started typing away on his keyboard, sending a message to Tessai and Yamamoto. He needed his Hogyaku to confirm his troubled theory. It was over an hour before the Kido Master and Captain Commander came to their location. This had better be important, Kisuk. Yamamoto growled, not wanting one of the most dangerous and volatile creations of recent memory out of its seal for too long. The particular seal we've made is incredibly taxing to do and undo. Tessai chimed in, carrying with him the box that held the forbidden device. Believe me, Urahara said with unease, I pray I'm wasting your time. He grabbed the box and removed his Hogyaku before placing it in a scanner. After a couple minutes the results were coming in, and he was not happy that they did. Just how depraved is that man? Kisuk groaned as he collapsed in his chair. These scans tell me that the Hogyaku is actually sentient, he said, shocking everyone in the room. When I first had the idea of the Hogyaku, I knew I needed a vast amount of Reishi, pure, unaltered Reishi. So, utilizing a Valley of Screams, I harnessed the power and made my Hogyaku. I succeeded, but it was inactive, almost as if it was sleeping. However, my method was only one possibility. Aizen took the other. He returned the Hogyaku to the box and glared at it. I used pure untapped energy while he must have harvested it from the souls around us. Shinigami, hollow, trying to balance out the mixture, and leaving him with an awakened Hogyaku. Yamamoto squeezed his cane, furious that such acts were going on without his notice. Age really was starting to get to him if something like that escaped him. I'd say don't worry because to properly use any Hogyaka requires a massive riot so, closer to Yamamoto in scale, but Ichigo and Aizen have proven that they have enough to use it. Ichigo when we tricked Aizen, and Aizen with these Aaron Carr. He hung his head in exhaustion, the discovery reminding him of what kind of being Aizen was. Return the Hogyaku to its seal. Genri Yusai finally ordered. We step up our preparations and anticipate the worst. With Ichigo's performance against that Espada, we may have a chance while Aizen bolsters his forces as well. Giving me ample time to train and prepare Ichigo for the coming battles. For now, keep silent about this. Especially since weddings are meant to be happy occasions. Considering it's the Kukakis, I doubt it. Mayuri said, surprising everyone. What? They're boring. Kukaki Manor. Ichigo made his way through the hallowed halls of the Kukaki household, noted as the keepers of Soul Society's history. He immediately remembered why he detested being in the building as he went past many of the house servants and other members of the family. Many of the lower members of the house looked at him in reverence, a mighty warrior that would save and change Soul Society for the better. Most of the more dull nobles held disdain that a half-breed commoner would dare walk in their presence. The smarter ones looked at him like a prize, a piece on their board game of petty politics. He even heard one say, that street rat Rukia has actually proven useful for once. Byakuya had his respect, he was alright with marrying Rukia, but he wanted nothing to do with these stuck-up bastards. The Shiba family was that, a family. The Kukakis made him feel like he should watch his back every second he was there. He neared the door when he heard Kyokaku and Byakuya talking. Won't be happy about this. He heard Kyokaku say, slight concern in her voice. I don't care. Byakuya said in his firm tone, showing the same steely resolve when he swore to uphold the law. I am the head of this clan and it will be as I command. He opened the door and interrupted the two heads, feeling this matter was probably about him. Ichigo Kurosaki. Byakuya greeted his soon-to-be brother-in-law. Byakuya. Kyokaku. Ichigo returned, greeted the two nobles. What was that about? We are planning to anger the elders. Byakuya said, almost chuckling. We've agreed on the place being in West Rukon and open for anyone to attend. It'd be a nice chance for the common folk to enjoy the festivities but some of the nobles won't approve. Kyokaku added, speaking much more smoothly. Too bad it's not their call. She chuckled, earning a rare smirk from the sixth captain. On to other matters, it's time for you to meet my clan's tailor for your robes. Ichigo groaned, not wanting to stand still for hours on end while putting on a much heavier set of clothes he's only going to wear for, well not one day as he had his other lovers but still. The door opened and he was expecting one of the maids to be there to escort him to the tailor. He wasn't expecting his bride to be. Brother, are you sure I look okay? Rukia said as she came into the room. She wore a white wedding kimono with a snowflake pattern that shimmered in the light like a fresh blanket of snow. She had her hair cut into a cropped bob hanging around her face. She seemed more mature as well, like her training with Yuka-take made her grow. She's changed so much in such a short amount of time. Ichigo. She stuttered, clearly not expecting him, as her face burned into a surprised blush. How do I look? She asked timidly, smiling slightly at seeing her friend and future husband. She was surprised again when he took her hand and clasped it in his own while looking straight into her eyes. Marry me Rukia. He yelled out suddenly, making Rukia's entire face turn red as Ichigo looked completely serious. The moment was interrupted when Kyokaku punched her cousin in the back of his head. You're already getting married, you dumbass. She yelled out, as crass as ever. Ichigo was pulled away by one of the Kukaki maids while Rukia was still frozen in shock, redder than Renji's hair. Kyokaku then decided to have some fun. Yes Rukia, you do look lovely. Though I bet you're more excited about your wedding night. She teased, somehow making Rukia turn redder and emitting steam from her ears. Yeah, Ranjiku told me how you got a preview. Now just imagine all that long, thick dash. She was interrupted by a swift crack to her head, courtesy of Byakuya's sheath. Don't be so vulgar, Shiba-san. He scolded the tomboy, who was rubbing her sudden lump. And Rukia. He saw his sister, passed out on the floor from what seemed to be overheating. Why am I letting this happen again? 1 week later, Shiba clan estate. Parties were had, people were gathered, and a good number of the male captains and lieutenants sported a couple black eyes and swollen cheeks. Ichigo's bachelor party ended in violence. Ichigo's friends and family was there as well, leaving Lisa to lead the squad. Ishine was glowing with pride, Yuzo and Karen happy to see their family grow, and Masaki, who wore reishi handcuffs and was gagged after she somehow started to breathe fire, she was still glaring at everyone. He stood in front of a small altar, wearing a midnight black kimono with dark silver bottom, with Chad and Urayu at his side, who insisted that his formal attire would be Quincy appropriate and somehow got his way. When the ceremony began, Genri Yusai led the procession with Rukia and Byakuya trailing behind him and the Kukaki clan elders following behind. Yamamoto took his place at the altar while Rukia stood next to her soon-to-be husband. He gave a standard speech of love and union and a dawn of change for all of Soul Society. Ichigo and Rukia exchanged sake and their rings while making their vows. By the laws of Soul Society and my authority as Captain Commander of the Godi I-15, I now pronounce you man and wife. Yamamoto spoke out for all to hear. Now you are Ichigo and Rukia Kurosaki. There was much applause, but Ichigo heard a few surprised gasps. He looked at the Kukaki elders, all wearing strained smiles. You may kiss the bride. Rukia pulled Ichigo in for a passionate kiss, focusing his attention on her, then throwing the bouquet, aiming for Ichigo's other lovers. It shocked everyone when Nimue caught it and was next to Urayu, leaning her head on his shoulder. Even Yoriyuki commented on the girl's speed. All a nice distraction as they head for the reception, but Ichigo still felt the glares from the Kukaki elders. After he managed to pull his father, Byakuya, and Kyokaku away, he demanded answers. Ichigo, his father started, in marriages like these, the one from the lower-ranked family usually marries into the higher-ranked one. Meaning you'd be Ichigo Kukaki instead of Shiba or Kurosaki. Ichigo took a brief moment to shudder, much to the annoyance of Byakuya. But, Byakuya had other ideas. The Kukaki head took over. Many nobles tend to be short-sighted. He said, with a calm seriousness. Caring only about their own gains. Unfortunately, my own clan elders are guilty of the same crime. He looked at his new brother and explained his situation. You represent a great change in Soul Society and are practically guaranteed to become a leader in Soul Society in the future. Their aim is to either get into your good graces or hold you under a heavy threat. Like being ready to have your wife killed at a moment's notice. Ichigo's eyes widened in shock, realizing this was why he felt he needed to watch his back in the Kukaki manner. So Rukia married into your family, putting her under the protection of the Shiba family in a home to be safe in. Kyokaku chimed in with a victorious smile on her face. Since most of the squads got re-inspected, it became harder to find a strong and competent enough Shinigami that could be bought, and the Kukaki elders would never sink so low as to go to the lower districts to find an assassin. Effectively, Byakuya started again, you have no obligation to my family and Rukia will be safe with the Shibas. He said, taking a drink of wine. And since any and all dealing between our clans will be done between Kyokaku and myself, they have been removed from much of any new power and authority they may have gotten. Don't you fear a reprisal? Ichigo asked. Suddenly the air around him grew cold as Byakuya exerted his power. I am a captain of the 15 court guard squads, and head of the Kukaki family. He said coldly. I fear no man or underhanded attempts on my person. You needn't worry about me. Later that night at a secret meeting of the Kukaki elders. That damned brat. One of them growled out, reflecting the attitude of most of his fellows. Who does he think he is? A perfect chance to raise the Kukaki clan to a state above the other 4 noble houses and he just throws it away. Said another, calmer but still angry. He insults the entire clan and the traditions that have made us strong. It was bad enough he brought those 2 peasants into the clan. A third said, speaking in disgust of Rukia and her late sister. Now he does this? What next, burning down the historical archives? No, not Byakuya. One spoke out, with enough authority that the others seemed to look at him as the leader. It's that filthy hybrid Ichigo Kurosaki. He's responsible for all of this. Byakuya would still be compliant if he never appeared and everything would be as it should. So we remove him. Another said, already planning something. Prevent him from corrupting Byakuya any further. Ichigo Kurosaki is the disciple of Genri Yusai Yamamoto. One almost shouted in shock. Who is capable of challenging that? Not all of the powerful warriors in Soul Society became Shinigami. The leader reminded them. And some that are still bearing an overpowering grudge against certain members of the Godai. I have an associate who has an idea, and creating the means, to take care of our problems. He said, thinking back to his ally in a clan second only to any of the four great nobles, Gyokaku Kyunhwa. Illustrated Guide to Soul Reapers. Ichigo's Bachelor Party. All the notable men of the court guard gathered together to celebrate Ichigo's last night as an unmarried man. There were food, drinks, music. Kenpei wasn't trying to fight someone, yet, and Mayuri was tied up in the timeout corner for asking Ichigo for same kind of sample that got the scientist a black eye. Not as wild as Kenpei's, but after the weeks of battles and dangers, people were glad to just unwind. Then Yushiro brought out a massive chocolate cake. Here you go, Ichigo. He cheered, holding out a cake slicer. Enjoy the cake. Yuruaki-ne-sama made it herself just for you. Ichigo was so confused by the image that he never noticed Urahara and Tessai coming up from behind with a chair and several high-level binding seals. That explains so much and yet so little. He said, looking at the confection cutter in his hand and the cake with slight worry. I'm not sure why, but I don't want to cut it. He said just before Tessai and Urahara got him on the chair. Too bad. He said with glee as dozens of Kido restraining spells locked him in place. You don't need to cut it. Ladies. He knocked on the cake and out popped Rangiku and Kyokaku, with cat ears and tails, wearing micro-bikinis. Remember Ichigo, look but don't touch. Urahara said while the two bustiest women in Soul Society danced for Ichigo's arousal/torment. When I get out of here, I'm kicking all of your asses. He yelled out, straining against the seals. Chapter 45, Theft of the Seal. Soul Society. It was a week after their wedding, a week spent away from it all. From squads, paperwork, fights, patrols, nothing but themselves, indulging in each other to calm their nerves. Ichigo and Rukia enjoyed their vacation, granted to them by the captain commander, in a small house away from Siriti. The only notable instance of anything in that week was when Tessai stopped by to give Ichigo a tattoo. It was part of a hypothesis that Urahara developed that should make him immune to Kyoka Suijutsu's power, so now Ichigo had a visage of his horned mask over his heart in metallic ink. They were sitting in front of the lake by the lodge when they saw a single black butterfly heading toward them. Guess this means our honeymoon's over. Rukia said as the messenger landed on Ichigo's finger. After a couple seconds passed, he released a sigh as he rose to his feet. What does Yamamoto want? Something about a joint operation with Tashiro's squad. He said while heading into the small cabin to change into his Shiakusho. Inter-squad teams were not unusual but full squad team UPS don't happen unless it's something major. They quickly changed and Ichigo brought them both to the 1st Division base, entering to find Tashiro, Rangiku, Ishine, Tessai, Haki, and Yamamoto waiting for them. Kojiro was making tea, Western style. The meeting must be serious if he was getting away with that. Rukia quickly left to return to her own division as Ichigo went inside the meeting room, taking his place beside his father. Thank you for gathering on such short notice. Yamamoto began in his aged gravelly voice. It's that time when we must transport the Oin. At that word the older Shinigami faces hardened, reflecting the gravity of the situation. Tashiro and Rangiku looked shocked while Ichigo was out of the loop. Something Genri Yusai recognized and began to rectify. The Oin is the royal seal of the Soul King, hidden away in the living world and moved roughly every couple of decades. Like anything pertaining to the Soul King, it is an object of great power that was deemed forbidden to look at directly. Ichigo's expression clearly marked his annoyance and disbelief. So we won't know if we even have the right one for transport. Ichigo stated, letting said annoyance show. Why are we even doing this? Don't we have more important things to do? The ice captain and ash lieutenant looked to Ichigo in shock of his brazen attitude, sure that he just angered Yamamoto. Like the war against Aizen. The hybrid continued without fear, earning an affirmative nod from his teacher. Absolutely. That is why we're doing this in the first place. The old man said, again earning a shocked look from the youth. Tessai took over, as it was his idea. Aizen looked into a lot of information regarding the Soul King and the Oken. The spell master started. So it's possible he knows about the Oin, but not where it is. Here's the plan, he said before bringing up the holographic projector in the room and displaying the parade escorts. Squad 10 will be joined by Hachigen to recover the Oin and transport it, while Squad 15 and myself will act as a decoy. Should either come under attack, the other will be immediately alerted. So this is banking on the assumption that they'll go after ours because we're the greater threat and more likely to be protecting the real Oin. Ishin asked the other commanders. Can't we seal it away and post decoys anyway? Were it that easy? Tessai sighed heavily. What we are aware of is that the Oin actually alters entire areas, making its hiding place rich in reishi. And according to what we've found about Aizen's research, it takes 100,000 souls in a half-spirit-mile wide radius of land to make an Oken. That land is currently Karakura Town, where the Oin is currently sealed. Ichigo and Ishin gasped at the implications and what Aizen was threatening. Because of our focus being on the war and the sudden need to relocate it, the SRDI was only able to make one usable decoy. The human world defenders let out a disappointed groan. Now they are focusing on creating a seal so we won't have to worry about it. Fine. Ishin said as he recovered. Let's get to it. World of the living. The two processions made their way through the sky, a hidden ceremonial parade of musicians and dancers, all led by the Kido Corps and guarded by two entire squads. Tessai and Haki were in front of the main altars for each parade, sealing them behind a barrier to protect the precious cargo within. Everything was quiet, calm, but no one dropped their guard. The soldiers and spellcasters were ready for most anything. Tessai and Haki were ready to deploy forbidden Kido spells, granted special permission to use such if it protected the artifact. They were ready, or at least they were mostly prepared. It appeared as though the decoy didn't fool their enemies as a torrent of flame blasted toward Haki. No problem. He said coolly, snapping his fingers and creating a barrier to block the flames. Commander, they're attacking Dash, he was calmly saying before lightning struck him from above. Without the spellmaster conscious, the Kido he made began to dispel and allow the large ball of fire and lightning to attack with free rein. Soon the convoy was in chaos as the elements attacked. They're attacking, let's go. Tessai yelled out, stabbing his staff in place while the entirety of Squad 15 gathered around him. Kyokantanai. He called out, clapping his hands together and pulling them apart with a sphere of light surrounding them. The second that light disappeared, they were next to Squad 10's convoy, which were under heavy attack. Toshiro was currently clashing with someone that wore a ragged cloak and a hollow's mask. The strangest thing though, was that their swords were almost identical. That can't be right. Ichigo thought as he and the squad moved on the assault. Orium was healing, everyone else was either fighting or rescuing the other convoy. Ichigo flew in to assist while Ishin cleared out two girls that were red and blue, appearing to be Aaron Carr. Ichigo was in earshot as he heard the masked figure speak. You haven't changed at all, he said, prompting Toshiro to try and remove the mask. He only managed to grab the cloak as the figure started to escape, revealing Shinigami attire. Ichigo landed next to Hitsugaya as the young captain seemed downcast. Someone you knew? Ichigo asked, seeing a spot of growing blood on the boy's body. He looked at Ichigo with concern, doubt, before tensing up. Don't you even think about Dash, the hybrid started as Hitsugaya Flash stepped away, it. Damn ice midget. He groaned just before the ruin altar exploded. Squad 10's members yelled out in worry while Ishin, Tessai, and the members of Squad 15 just waited. Ichigo crawled out of the rubble, regenerating from burns and shrapnel as he stood in front of the remaining leaders. Doesn't matter if I heal fast, this still hurts. He groaned, pulling out a couple stakes of wood from his arms and chest. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we just lost the Oin. Soul Society. Almost immediately upon returning to Siriti and informing the other captains of the situation, SWAFON took a unit of the stealth force to go to the crash site of the OIN convoy to try and find anything clues or leads on the attackers and Ichigo's sudden disappearance. Uriah stuck around with the SWAFON's group in the human world while the other seated members of the 15th searched the city and surrounding areas. In Soul Society, the injured went to Squad 4 while the Tessai, Ishine, Ichigo, and Rangiku all went to deliver their report of what happened to the head captain. And Toshiro left without saying a word. Ishine said, finishing his report. I assume to find and hunt down the people responsible. Yamamoto stroked his beard in thought. A masked Shinigami and 2 are in car. He murmured, evaluating the information in his mind. And what would possess Captain Ichigo to move without reporting in or to just act on his own accord? He finally asked the captain. To his expectation, it was Ichigo who stepped forward. Sensei, I could be wrong, but it might be someone Toshiro feels he should deal with on his own. The hybrid announced. His sword looked very similar to Toshiro's own Zanpakuto. There was a gasp of shock in a number of the assembled members of the court guard squads. It's impossible for 2 people to have the same Zanpakuto, but how similar can they be? The question lingered among the leaders of the Shinigami as they tried to decipher their lone clue, a possible second Hierin Meru. Something rare enough that it should be easy to find in the archives. Genri Yusai finally said as he began to give out his orders. Captains Urahara and Kukaki, search the archives for any trace of this instance. You are granted full access to all records to find an answer. The 2 nodded in affirmation to their commands. Captain and Lieutenant Kurosaki, you are both to look for Ichigo and find out anything you can. The father and son did the same as the previous captains. Lieutenant Matsumoto, you are to return to your division, take charge as acting captain, and await further orders. Rangiku was about to say something before a glance from Ishine stopped her. You have your orders. Dismissed. Squad 10 Barracks. Ishine got a call from Uriah that prompted his immediate return to the human world, something Uriah found after SWAFO and confirmed that the OIN was missing. He ordered Ichigo to take a look through Toshiro's office to see if he could find anything that could help. The 10th squad looked miserable, failing their mission, and their captain went missing in action. He heard a couple saying it was just as bad as when Captain Ishine disappeared. Matsumoto was doing her best to cheer up her squad mates, but even she couldn't raise her attitude to the usual cheer she had. The entire squad seemed heartbroken, giving Ichigo all the more drive to try to find and bring back their missing captain. Come on! Ichigo roared in mental frustration, tearing through anything about Ichigo's past he could get his hands on. There's got to be something here. Anything about someone with an identical Zanpakuto. He might not be in the official records. Ichigo. The elder of the 2 Zanjutsu spoke to him. Just because they looked similar doesn't mean they are the same. But it's kind of a gut feeling that they are connected. The hollow of the 2 said, offering his insight. It's impossible for 2 of the same exact Zanpakuto aside from dual wielding. Since that unknown assailant's blade resembled Hierin Meru so closely, it's reasonable to think that their abilities will also be very similar. Question is this guy even registered in the system, or was he just some random guy that managed to grab an Azuashi like Zaraki did? Ichigo asked, finally giving up on Toshiro's diaries and journals after finding nothing for the 100th time. His phone rang with a text from his father, ordering him to return to the human world. He got ready to leave when Rangiku came into the office. Yeah, Rangiku? He asked, not used to seeing the usually jovial lieutenant looking so serious. I'm going with you, she said. There was no demand, no request, she said it like it was a fact. One that Ichigo didn't agree with. No, you're not, he said, putting everything back in its place. You are staying here, making sure your squad recovers, and you are going to lead them until further orders. He tried to leave, but she grabbed his sleeve and made him face her. Ichigo, he's my captain, she said, reminding him that this was technically a matter for her squad. I understand, Rangiku, but you can't leave your squad leaderless like that, he said, using duty to override emotion. Ichigo, please, she pleaded, tears growing in her eyes. I can't lose another captain. Her grip began to slack as she came closer to breaking down. Ichigo wrapped his arms around her and she stilled, slowly latching onto him like a security blanket. "Don't worry," he said, tenderly stroking her back. "Everything will be all right. I'll make sure of it." After waiting for a few more seconds, he pulled away and turned to open space while flicking his wrist, opening a neat garganta. Ranjika watched as he walked away, a matching silhouette of Jin appearing by his side. Once again, someone she cared about, someone that she felt she could lean on, was leaving without telling her where they were going. Just like Jin did all the time. At least, she thought it was. Ichigo looked back to her and flashed a confident smile. "I'm going to bring him back, Ranjiku. Don't worry," he said before disappearing into the void. Silence returned to the squad barracks, leaving her with only one noise. The sound of her heart beating loudly in her chest. Urahara Shoten/Squad 15 barracks. Ichigo made his way through his interdimensional portal and returned to his squad's base in the living world. He made his through the base and, taking directions from his squad members, many of whom were almost or fully recovered, made his way to the division's prison cell. Inside were Orium, his father, and Toshiro Hitsugaya enveloped in Orium's healing shield. "That was annoyingly fast," Ichigo said as he came into the room, the other two keeping a focused gaze on the young captain. "What happened?" After Swafo and confirmed the loss of the Oinen departed, some of the squad found him passed out from blood loss. Ishine informed his second-in-command. "We currently have him under for now, because I'm wondering whether if he'll tell me anything, or if I should call Tsukishima." "Toshiro's not an idiot, Dad," Ichigo reassured his father. "When he wakes up, he'll understand that he might as well tell us what's going on." "Does Yamaji know?" Ishine nodded as Orium finished up. "Hiri set up the audio transmission so he can hear what happens, but only those in the monitor room and myself will know what he says." He nodded to his son, telling him to go to Hiri's station and await further orders. He made his way to her room, which had a video link with Urahara, Byakuya, and Yamamoto waiting. No words were exchanged for hours as they waited. Finally Toshiro woke from his drug-induced slumber. "Wakey wakey Toshiro," Ishine said in his dad voice, cheery with enough anger to know he's less than thrilled. "You've got some explaining to do, young man." "Captain Shiba, Hitsugaya started as he steadily grew more awake, until the sound of a fist colliding with a skull woke him right up. The lecture from his former captain only made it worse for the boy. "Abandoning your post, making no excuse or justification for your actions, letting someone get the drop on you? Weren't you raised better than that?" Ishine scolded, giving Ichigo flashbacks to the few times he made Ishine met himself. Those were scary memories. "Now, you are not going anywhere until I get some answers. If you can prove to me you had a good reason for the stunt you pulled, I won't turn you into Yamamoto." There was a pause as they waited for the Ice Dragon's response. "Fine," Hitsugaya said, almost defeated. "But please, Captain, let me deal with this. I promise to retrieve the Oin, but if I'm right then this is something I have to do." Ichigo and the other listened intently, waiting for the reason, any excuse that might seem justifiable to let things take this course. "When I was still an academy student I had a very close friend, named Kyuzaka Sojiro. We always ended up competing, but it was to improve ourselves as we strove to be the best in the academy." Urahara and Byakuya immediately began poring through the archives, looking for anything regarding this Kyuzaka character. "But that changed when we managed to awaken our Zapakuto and we had the same sword, Hirin Meru." There was a look of disbelief among the older captains, but they held their tongues and kept listening. "Apparently this was against the law, as Central 46 demand that one of us prove our worth for the blade. Kyuzaka started the fight, and was executed after he was deemed unworthy." "And you think this Kyuzaka has the Oin?" Ishine asked, not a single hint of doubt in his tone. "To what end?" "That's what I want to find out. So please, Captain Shiba, let me deal with this. I have to," Toshiro pleaded. Ichigo looked to Urahara, who seemed to have found something, and whispered to Yamamoto. Ichigo saw the old dragon grip his cane tightly, actually digging into the wooden disguise of his blade. He knew his master was furious because his head can attest to how strong that damn stick was. Ishine, the leader of Soul Society, finally spoke. "Captain Hitsugaya is granted permission to pursue this matter. But he will not do so alone. He faced Ichigo and continued his command. Ichigo will accompany him until the Oin is recovered. Ishine relayed the orders, while making it seem that Yamamoto was left unaware. Toshiro was thanking his previous captain greatly as a result. Ichigo, the Oin must be recovered at all costs. Until it is safely in our hands, no holding back. Ichigo nodded at his teacher, determined not to let the world come under any risk. Soul Society. Soon Toshiro, the masked figure, thought as he stood atop a building within the Siriti. He remembered the treachery of the corrupted Soul Society, how his devotion was paid with betrayal. All because they had the same blade. His fading soul coming into contact with the power of the Oin, like fate itself, wanted him to survive. It took years of training, waiting, building up his power to finally steal the Oin. He knew when it revived him that it had the power to fully control time and space, the power forbidden to anyone but the Soul King. He was surprised by the extra convoy, but he knew the true Oin when he felt it. Now all that was left was to ensure that Toshiro would join him, but Soul Society was not as he remembered. Master Kyuzaka. He heard his two loyal Arankar, Yin and Yang, come to him. Yang with red hair and fire, Yin with blue and lightning. Both nearly identical aside from their color and haircuts, wearing the same sleeveless jackets with their color-coded elbow-length gloves and skirts. It appears that Toshiro Hitsugaya made contact with one of the new Godei squads. Should we go after them? No. Kyuzaka answered. Separate Toshiro from them, he will come to me. His hand went to the Oin hidden in his pocket. After all, we want the same thing. Check the description for the links to the author.